Hey guys, welcome back to the channel and welcome to my collection video on this brand new BMW M2. Massive thanks to BMW UK for throwing me the keys to this car for the next 4 months. I can't wait to share as much content as possible with you guys, so please feel free to leave any comments and suggestions below. I'm going to try and cover as much as I can, and in fact in a couple of weeks I'm taking it straight out to Germany, so I'm looking forward to that trip. And I'm looking forward to living with this car for the next 4 months. It's a manual car, so hopefully it's safe in my hands. And it's in Toronto Red, which is one of the 5 standard launch colours that the G87 came in. Although when I was on the configurator this morning doing my homework and checking for recent pricing, etc., I noticed that BMW added 2 extra individual frozen colours. So frozen pure grey, which just looked incredible, at least on the configurator, and frozen Portimao blue. Both of those individual frozen colours will set you back £2,000, which actually is about half the price it would cost you if you had an M3 or an M4. I can't wait to see either of those in the flesh because I think they'll suit the M2's boxy shape really well. Aside from gearbox and colours, the new M2 doesn't really have many other options to choose from, but this particular press car pretty much has everything. Options like the M Race Pro Pack, which include those gorgeous carbon bucket seats, and this particular one also has the Comfort Pack, so steering wheel heating, comfort access, etc. It also says it has blue calipers on the spec sheet, which are a no-cost option, but this particular car definitely doesn't have blue calipers. In terms of UK pricing, well, like so many cars out there, it's already started to rise. So a base M2 with a manual gearbox is going to be £66,000. That M Race Track Pack we talked about, well, that's going to set you back £9,100. I'm sure that was just under £7,000 only a few weeks ago. The Comfort Pack at least, well, that's a more sensible £800 odd. And those blue calipers, which this car doesn't have anyway, are free of charge. When you add all of that up, this baby M is going to set you back £76,000. Of course, you can spend a lot more than that if you opt for some of their tacky M Performance parts, but I would steer well clear of those. Maybe aside from the carbon intakes and the front bumper, they look pretty good. In here, we have the familiar S58. Essentially the same lump that's in the current M3 and M4, except it's been slightly detuned for the M2. Produces 460 horsepower and 550 newtons of torque. All of that runs through, in this car's case, that 6-speed manual gearbox, but there is an optional 8-speed automatic, just like the one in my M3 Touring. And actually, if you go for the 8-speed automatic, it will cost you about £1,000 less. I think that's the first time I've ever seen that on any production car, and that's simply because the majority of people are going to buy their M2s with the 8-speed auto, and therefore, just to make the manual available to the purists, BMW have had to charge a little bit of an excess on that, and I'm fine with that because I think at least it gives us purists the option to go for a 6-speed manual. And unlike the M3 and M4, the M2 is only available in rear-wheel drive. BMW claimed this manual car would do the 0 to 62 sprint in 4.3 seconds and the auto would do it in 4.1 seconds. Both boxes will go onto a limited top speed of 155 miles an hour. In terms of weight, well, this is roughly 1,700 kilos, which is about 75 kilos more than the predecessor, the F87 M2, like my one. Jumping in here, well, it's a very familiar place to sit. Feels very much like the current M3 or M4. We have exactly the same steering wheel. We have these optional carbon bucket seats, which I'm personally very familiar with, but the M2 has a unique colorway. I really like it with the blue and the red, and we've got the black down the center. We've got some Alcantara and leather. I think they look spot on. Are they worth over £9,000? Well, that's your choice to make. It's such a shame that you can't buy them as an individual option for £3,500 or £4,000, whatever they would be, because having to be forced into that £9,100 option is a little bit cruel as far as I'm concerned. The rest of the dashboard's very similar. Again, we've got the curved display. The M2 has unique doors compared to the M3 and M4. These are essentially the 2 Series doors with this little colorway here, which I'm not the biggest fan of, but it doesn't offend me too much. And just like the M3 and M4, these cars come with so much standard equipment, things like the head-up display, Harman Kardon sound system, we've got 3-way climate control in here, cruise control, you name it, this car's pretty much got it. And that's why the actual options are very limited, because the car at base comes with pretty much everything. And when we get down here in the center console, well, this is different to any UK M3 or M4, but almost the same as that manual M4 that I had out in Germany at the end of 2021, because we have a manual gear stick, and that means that this whole central piece is slightly different to the auto version. So this manual box, so it's first, second, third, fourth, and then it must be fifth. Yeah, because third didn't work out for me, so it must be fourth into fifth, not fourth into third, unless you're slowing down. I think I'm getting the gist of this now. It's probably no surprise that the driving position is absolutely spot on, and that's because it's on the same chassis as the M3 and M4, so I'm sitting lovely and low. Something that a lot of people have asked me on Instagram already in the 48 hours I've had this car is, what's the pedal layout and the manual gearbox like in general with these seats? Because obviously you've got this carbon codpiece holder between your legs, and a lot of people have been concerned if that gets in the way. So we'll talk a bit about that when we take it out on the road in a second. You have your M1 and your M2 button on the wheel, just like you do with other more expensive M cars, and you can individualize those to bring up all your favorite settings. Engine gear shift assist, which is a new one for the new M2. You can individually switch that on or off, and that's the auto blip when you shift down the gearbox. Essentially, in the F87, that was always on unless you turn traction control completely off, and then it was off. I always wish that there was a button that sort of you could separately do that with. And we have chassis, steering, brakes, and the M traction control, which is the 10-way variable traction control. So that technology is in the M2 just like it is in the more expensive M3 and M4, and I think that's really, really cool. 2 cup holders, we've got a small little tray there, so it's not quite the same as what I've got in my M3, because that is the charging tray in the M3. But the charging bay is in this storage bin in the central console. It looks a bit like an afterthought, if I'm being honest, and it does take up quite a bit of the space in here, but at least you can charge your phone in there if you need to wirelessly. You've also got a USB-C socket here, you've got a USB socket there, and you've got a couple of USB-C sockets in the back for your rear seat passengers. Because remember, to me, that's what sort of divides the M2 when you compare it to cars like the brilliant Porsche Cayman. The Porsche Cayman is strictly a 2-seater, and I've talked about this for 5 or 6 or 7 years, in fact, with M2s. These are kind of unique because unlike a Cayman or a Lotus Emira, this has 4 seats. You can get 4 adults in here and a lot of luggage in the boot. You can't do that with those cars. So it is kind of not a standalone product, but it is a slightly different product. And although we already know it's not quite as driver focused and brilliant dynamically as something like a Cayman GTS or a Cayman GT4, but neither of those cars give you any kind of practicality in the sense that this one does. And because this is mine for the next 4 months, I've already started making it my own by adding things like my quad lock phone holder to the windscreen. Got a charging cable down here, some sunglasses. It's a really nice feeling knowing that this car isn't going to go back in the next 4 or 5 days. Right, let's go and find a good road. First thing to talk about is this car being practically brand new. It's only done 2,500 miles. It's only about a month old. It's now fitted as standard as part of, I think, EU laws, yet more laws, trying to kill off the excitement of driving. It's fitted with a speed warning. You can switch off, but as far as I know, you have to switch off each and every time you get in the car. Now, I'm not suggesting that I speed or you should speed, but what I am telling you is that every time you essentially touch the speed limit, so on these roads around here it's mostly 60, if you touch an indicated 61 or 62, indicated, so therefore no faster than the actual speed limit, you get this bong, and it's so annoying. And that happens every time you go into a new speed limit. So if you come into a town and you go through the 30 sign and indicated, let's say 31, you'll get a bong. And once again, I want to stress that I'm not encouraging anyone to speed. In fact, I'm completely against it, especially in built up areas. But I can tell you, when you're in a 40 or 50 or 60 zone and you're sitting around the speed limit, which you have to in many cases to keep up with the traffic, the speed limiter or the speed warning comes on all the time, and it's really frustrating. Thankfully you can turn it off, and big shout out to my good friend and BMW wizard Tim King. You basically have to go into the driving settings app and turn it off in one of the sub menus in there, but having to do that each and every time you get in the car, well, that's going to be a real pain. So please, I welcome anyone that can show me how to turn it off full stop, because yeah, that's going to get annoying very quickly. Next thing naturally to talk about is the manual gearbox. I think it's the same gearbox that was in the F87, my M2, and many other F-Series M cars. It feels very similar. Doesn't feel quite as rubbery, especially for something that's brand new, because these boxes tend to free up and feel better once you've used them quite a lot. But ratio-wise, action-wise, it feels very, very similar, and that's not a bad thing. But it means it's nothing as good as a box in a Cayman of any description, or something like the brilliant FL5 Honda Civic Type R. I mean, that gearbox is just, it's amazing. But yeah, I've really enjoyed the past 48 hours, and I think a lot of that has to do with having a manual box back in the car. And although it is a bit of a sore point for me, I've realised very quickly why my M2 is manual, and why I love manual cars so much. And don't get me wrong, I can understand why auto's going to outsell manual by a country mile on this car, and it does in the M3 and the M4 in places like Germany where you can get a manual option. But it's just lovely to have this, and I certainly feel like I'm more part of the car than if it was an auto box. This car, it's just epic on so many levels. I'm not going to beat around the bush. I can't hide the fact that I absolutely love it already. You know I do. That pre-prototype 18 months ago, I loved. The first drive out in Arizona earlier this year, had a fantastic time in that car. I was a little bit worried though, because we're out in America on gorgeous American roads. They weren't perfect, but certainly better than most of the UK roads we get around here. And also that M2 being an American spec car, well, it didn't have OPF filters, and it did sound a little bit fruitier, but this still sounds epic. It still sounds really good, and yes, there is some fake sounds going around the cabin, but BMW and others are starting to master that and make it sound a bit less fake, or at least my ears are maybe coming around to accepting it, and I'm not wanting to turn it off completely. And in fact, if I take it out of Sport Plus and back into efficiency and sort of the base levels that this car is, when you default and start the car up, well, it's almost a little bit too quiet with everything off. So yeah, my M1 is Sport Plus on the throttle, although I might knock that back to Sport because in wet weather, I experienced last night, it's got a lot of pickup. This car doesn't feel like it's really been detuned. It feels very punchy, very quick in gear. It feels like it has more torque down low than, say, my M3 Touring, but I reckon a lot of that has to do with the fact that it's probably 200 kilos lighter than my M3 Touring. So when something's lighter, you feel the torque better, but it's just great. Any gear pulls loads. But unlike, let's say, that 992 GTS manual that I had recently, that just had loads of power and loads of torque absolutely everywhere, and the problem with that car, as I talked about in that video, was didn't matter if you were in 4th or 5th cruising around at 30 or 40 miles an hour, it just had loads of go everywhere, so you never really were encouraged to go down the box. In this one, yes, it's got that low down torque, but if you really want to go, you've got to put it into a lower gear and go from there, use the revs, use the power. Let's just do a little overtake here. It's so much fun. It's such a great little car. It's not little, is it? No, I should stop saying little car. It is 11 centimeters shorter than a G82 M4, but it's just as wide, and you do feel that on the road. It does have a big footprint. It doesn't feel any smaller from the driver's seat than an M3 and M4 because it's just as wide. The concern about the pedal placement and these seats, essentially, well, the first 20 minutes behind the wheel, I was also a little bit concerned. I could feel and was aware of this carbon codpiece holder sort of on my leg, and thought that it might affect me a little bit more, or affect this experience. But 2 days into it, I've completely forgotten about that. Everything works absolutely fine. You just adjust to it. I mean, the driving position is so adjustable. You know, these seats are just unreal, and you can very quickly, at least in my instance with my frame, work around that. Feels, yeah, absolutely great. If this was mine, I would not be gutted that I'd gone for the carbon bucket seats and manual box, because they do work together really well. And I'd already experienced that on that M4 non-comp manual that I tried at the end of 2021 in Germany, but that was a left-hand drive car, obviously being a German press car, so it was really difficult for me to get my head around everything because the gear stick was on the wrong side, and yeah, everything was sort of back to front. I know this car has a lot of love and a lot of hate online, and to be honest, that's nothing new, especially with modern M cars. I also see a lot of people coming around to liking it, just like they did with the M3 and the M4, and all I can say is hold your judgment until you see one on the road. And this is a very stock car, obviously being a press car that belongs to BMW UK. When people like Jack from Auto ID or Imran from Evolve get their hands on one of these, well, we'll soon see what they look like after a bit of work. And in fact, Jack and the boys at Auto ID have already started modifying his one, and it's starting to look pretty special. So keep an eye out on Jack's and Imran's, because they will give you a good idea of how special one of these will look, or can look, once they've had a few modifications done to them, because they certainly need the basics like wheel spacers, a little bit of lowering, and even those two basic mods will improve the way this looks by a long way, because the wheels look like they sit way too far inside the arches, all to do with Euro regulations, unfortunately. Next thing is price. Now we know car prices have just gone nuts over the past couple of years, and the M2 is a prime example of that. 65 grand base with an auto box. This one has option. We talked about £76,000 for a 2 Series. But I was very quickly reminded on Instagram a couple of days ago when I posted something about pricing that actually, although we get stung here in the UK, we're very lucky compared to countries like Ireland or Singapore, Norway, Finland. I've had loads of people message me about what their sort of respected countries and governments charge them for car tax, luxury car tax, VRT, whatever it will be. And it's just next level. I mean, some of these countries are literally paying more than 2 times what we pay. So although that doesn't help the situation over here, I can say that we're far more fortunate than other countries. But yeah, 76 grand for a 2 Series is a lot of money. And then when you factor in interest rates are high, so those lovely 0% or 2% APR PCP finance deals are no longer. So when you add up the higher retail price with very little to no discount and the higher interest rates, well, those monthly figures are basically double of what they were on the previous M2, and there's no getting away from that. It is what it is, unfortunately. I'll finish by saying a massive thanks once again to BMW UK's press team for lending me this car for the next 4 months. It's a press car, it's not a marketing car. I'm not being paid to say anything, I'm not being paid for fuel or expenses. I've been given the car to review and shoot content on, just like any other car, but I've got it for a longer period of time. I'm very fortunate. Earlier this year I gave back that long-term RS6, which was a fantastic car to have through the winter months, and now I've got this to live with for the rest of the summer. So I'm very, very fortunate and grateful to have it, because yeah, I think I'm going to have some fun in it. Take it on track for sure, see what it's like, and take it abroad very soon. In fact, take it over to Germany in a couple of weeks, as I think I talked about at the start of the video. So huge thanks to BMW press team for giving me this. Guys, as I said earlier on, please leave any comments below for suggestions of stuff that you want to know about this new M2. If there's any video ideas, etc., please drop them in the comment section below. Right, until the next video, I will see you very soon. Thanks a lot for the support. As always, take it easy. Cheers.